Greetings. Hey, thanks for being here on the Do Business Better podcast. It's me, your host, Damian Mason, but you knew that. It said so in the introduction. Got a great show for you today. Got a guy named Michael O'Brien. Michael O'Brien's got some similarities to me in that he gets paid to do speeches. He writes books. He's also an executive coach. He is going to help you and help us break the cycle of negative self-talk. He's going to tell us what terrible bosses teach us about leadership. And he's going to talk about building a strong network. You know, everybody that runs their own business, if you're self-employed, sole proprietorship, have your own business, employ 27 people, employ 270 people, you need to capitalize on your network. I've talked about this a little bit before here on the Do Business Better podcast, but all possibilities, all opportunities are derived from other humans. You know, we can say, oh, well, what's the business doing? Well, the business is doing what the people within the business are making it do. And what's the marketplace look like? The marketplace is made up of 7.6 billion people. So never forget that people are where opportunities are derived from. And as you've heard me say before, dear listener, every dollar you're going to make the rest of your life currently is someone else's dollar. So Michael O'Brien, welcome to the show. We're going to talk through those three things. Thanks for being here.
Damian, brother, thanks for having me. Looking forward to talking through those three things, and I really appreciate you bringing me on. I'm looking forward to the conversation.
Yeah, well, it'll be a good one. And by the way, if you're listening to this on your favorite podcast format, you know, Stitcher, iTunes, SoundCloud, whatever it should be, that's fantastic. But also, you can now watch the Do Business Better podcast on a playlist within my YouTube channel. D Mason Comedy is my YouTube channel, or just go on YouTube, type in Damian Mason, you'll find it, and there you'll find a playlist for Do Business Better and for the Business of Agriculture, my other podcast. Michael O'Brien, you were riding your bike down the road one day. You're riding your bike down the road one day. You love to bike. You're an exercise guy. You're a fit guy. That's good. I find that I exercise. I have my best ideas when I'm hiking in the mountain preserve behind my house. I get done. I go stretch in my exercise room, do a few push-ups, some sit-ups, and I'm working through an idea. You probably do the same thing. But one day an idea came to you by way of an SUV plowing into you and almost killing you. Give me the scoop.
Absolutely. So just like you with your hiking, like my bike time, my cycling time, best thinking time, like best ideas ever. Because you know, we when we're going, when we're grinding it out, it's hard to come up with our really great innovations. So I brought my bike out to New Mexico for a company offsite. I was doing a little loop around the hotel property, came around a bend. That SUV that you referenced was crossed into my lane fully, going about 40 miles an hour based on what the police estimate. And Damian, I remember everything about that. I thought first he was going to see me, he was going to move, and then he hit me. And I remember the sound of me going into the windshield, his grill, the screech of his brakes, the thud even I made when I came to the asphalt below, and I was knocked unconscious, as you can imagine. And when I regained consciousness, I knew I was in a world of hurt. Just the thought of moving was painful, but I also knew my life was in the balance based on what the EMTs were doing and just the whole vibe of the accident scene. And so that was a whole different moment. And the thought that came there was, hey, if I live, if I make it through this, I'm going to stop chasing happiness, because I was doing a whole bunch of that before my accident when I was a young professional doing the corporate thing.
Okay, so you're a young professional doing the corporate thing. I've been there. I've been on my own now I'm in my 26th year, 25 down, starting and halfway, almost more than halfway through my 26th year. I know what that feeling is like. Of course, it goes back a long time for me. You said, all right, and you know, everyone talks about that, life-changing moments, and they talk about coming out of the operating room and realizing, by golly, I'm going to make this change. So there you were. How old were you?
33. Two daughters, 3.5 years old, 7 months old, married 7 years. On all surface levels, things look pretty good. I was a stress puppy inside, so I was, trying to repress the stress, thinking it would go away. That was just a part of corporate America. And then, I had my first surgery. Took like 12 hours, 4 days in the ICU, broke a whole bunch of everything, including lacerating the femoral artery of my left leg. When the left femur shattered, it blew apart my left femoral artery as well. So that's what really created a life and death situation.
Isn't that the one that carries like half of your body's blood, and if it gets severed, like you've got like 4 minutes until you're dead or something?
Yeah, 4 4 minutes, 4 hours. So the doctors told my wife, had I been 10 years older or not in shape, they're like, there's no way your husband makes it to the hospital alive. So they're like, I don't know how your husband actually survived all this, let alone back to like, because they painted this horrible picture, Damian, as far as my life, like lifetime of limitations, dependencies, more surgeries. They're like, you're probably not gonna really walk that well ever again. You're probably never gonna get back on your bike. And this, like this whole scene got set up with like, hey, you have a life of uncertainty, and that didn't make me like all happy as a clam in sand. I went bitter, angry, revengeful. And growing up, I learned, hey, an eye for an eye. You harm me, I'm gonna harm you. And so I stayed in that funk for the longest time. And I still had that promise I made myself when they put me on the helicopter to take me to the trauma center in Albuquerque, that I was going to stop chasing happiness. But I didn't see anything happy in the moment. And it took me a big aha moment where they flew me back to New Jersey, had more surgeries, a few new hospitals. And then I realized, well, if I'm going to make my body better, I got to first like sort of check myself on my mindset. I had to make my mindset healthier to make my body healthier, to make the progress I wanted to make, because I desperately wanted to get out of the hospital like anybody would.
We go through these things. I've never been whacked and almost dead, but I can talk about, and my listeners and people that have read my book, by the way, if you're viewing this, I'm going to take my chance to plug the Do Business Better book. But anyway, in my book, I talk about the hard setback for me was not physical per se. It was after 9/11. And, you go through these setbacks that they're not just trying, where you go from beaten to, people are like, you're one of those guys that gets back on his feet. I'm like, yeah, but after the 11th knockdown, after the 12th knockdown, then you get depressed. And somewhere in there, you get mad. It's probably either before or after that. And so there you are, you're saying, hell, I didn't want to get hurt. I'm a 33-year-old man. I'm a young guy. I got children. And then there you are. So then tell me about the comeback when you said, by golly, I'm going to go and do this. I'm going to go what I know how to do. I'm going to teach executives how to be better executives. And everybody that listens to the show is an executive of their own enterprise, okay? You are the CEO of Me Incorporated. So that's why this matters, and that's why Michael O'Brien is here. You said, I'm going to go out and teach executives how to be better. Take me from them.
Yeah, great question, Damian. So I eventually got out of the hospital and I went back to my corporate career, but I went back with a completely different script, because I was like, hey, we got to change how we work together in a corporation. And I loved my corporation work. I loved leadership. And one of the things I wanted to do, because I knew I was going to go into this field of helping other executives lead better. There was something happened during the ICU visit that I write about in my book that I knew I'd follow in that path. It was only a matter of time. So I went back to my corporate life with a new script and worked my way up to the executive suite. And I was the head of North America for a pharmaceutical company, and I had a team of about 1,000 in Canada, US, and Mexico. And I then like sort of sit side by side with the executives, that your listeners, because I've walked a mile in their shoes. I think this is important. This is the value that you bring to your listeners and to your clients. And when you speak, because you've been there, you've walked a mile, you've been in the trenches. Now I try to help folks without having them go through what I went through, to say, hey, you know what? There's a different way you can lead that I think current day we need to lead in this way because of all the uncertainty in the world. We need more agility. So I work now with folks to say, hey, you can shift your perspective. You can prevent that bad moment from turning into a bad day. Let's get to work on trying to make that happen.
I apologize to you and to the listeners if they just heard the helicopter go over. I don't know. Probably a cat is stuck up a tree, so the Chopper 6 had to be there to put it on the evening news. Okay, so about being a different way to lead. All right, you've got 3 things we promised our listeners. What terrible bosses teach us about leadership. Let's go with that one, number 1. What did terrible? Okay, I've had bosses back when I had a corporate job, which is 25 years ago. I remember one of a regional manager, because I was a sales guy, told me that you've got to lie to your customers, otherwise they won't like you. And I'm 50 years old now, looking back at the 23-year-old version of myself being told that, thinking, what the hell? Is that leadership? Is that mentoring? Or is that the worst? I don't lie to my customers. I don't find that to be a good business practice. I was told that. So I'm just thinking about, what terrible bosses. They weren't like mean to me. They didn't like, sexually harass me or anything like that. But I can think about bad, stupid stuff I was instructed on. Take me away.
Yeah, so I wrote a blog post, Damian, on 10 lessons I've learned from my bad bosses for Salesforce.com. And all the guys, mainly guys that, 80% guys, 20% women, all were good people, right? They weren't, like you mentioned, there was no harassment. They weren't jerks, but they were just not effective leaders. So I think one of my bad bosses, it was a power over mentality he had. He had the old hierarchy, like I stand above you, you're beneath me, as opposed to what I learned through my recovery, this whole power with. So think of a tandem bike. Like I think in today's world, now this worked, the power over, the hierarchy, that structure.
Mhm.
When we came off the farm, something that you know a lot about, into manufacturing, and there was just like making widgets. The economy is different now. We have to get to a power with type of mentality. So that's one. So I learned a lot about
Power
how
with
to be in.
power with. Explain. You're saying instead of here's the boss, and then you're down here putting widgets into a box. Now the new effective. That was fine. Industrial Revolution 120 years ago.
Now it's about me as the leader. How do I partner with my team through better conversation? Because as you mentioned in your upfront, like things happen because of people, and things happen because we're having better conversations with our people. So how do we have a better conversation? We might direct less, tell less, and ask more questions to stimulate a different conversation. And then we start to harness the power of those around us. We're still in the leadership position. So from an org chart, we're still like, say, above on the org chart, but we're approaching our work with more curiosity and more togetherness. And therefore, we're having a better conversation. I think we start there. That was one of the lessons I learned from some bad bosses. I also learned the power with lesson from so many good bosses.
Okay, what other lessons we learn from terrible bosses? Because again, everybody that's run their own business, you're a boss in some capacity. If you don't even have employees, you're the boss of yourself. It's how you run your business. And then what other things do you learn from terrible bosses?
So communication clarity and priority clarity. So I know you've had some bosses because, as you mentioned, we're both sales guys. So it's, sort of all over the place sometimes. But when the priorities keep on changing for no apparent reason, or the communication isn't clear, we're as human beings, we're not so good when things get fuzzy. If it's a foe, we know what to do with a foe. If it's a friend, we know what to do with a friend. But when it's a frenemy or just it's uncertain, and in today's times, there's a lot of uncertainty, and so that causes a lot of stress. So I've had a lot of bosses in the past that could not communicate clearly on what our priorities were, and that just leaves you scrambling. So the good bosses I've learned, all right, communicate consistently, with clarity, with with directness too. You can be a direct, compassionate communicator, and then making sure that we line up our priorities so we spend a disproportional amount of time on those, and we stop chasing all those shiny objects that sort of steal and suck our time away from actually delivering the results that we need to deliver for our companies.
I love the thing, Michael, communication and prioritization clarification. Really, you're talking about, I put the IO in on all those words, but communication and priority clarity. And I like that. I'll give you an example from a communication standpoint. When I was a young sales rep, they sent me to San Diego from Indiana, plucked me and another guy that was our first year on the job, and said, "You're going to San Diego because we got problems there. You're going to be there for a couple of weeks." So we go to the headquarters in Chicago, and they hand us 2 airplane tickets. Said, "Yeah, we fired our representation there, and we need somebody to plug the hole." And then it was kind of a neat opportunity. I learned a lot. You talk about being thrown into a situation, but we were there for 5 months. And looking back, none of those people that were more experienced and our leaders ever said, hey, you know what, this is going to take longer than 2 weeks. We got real problems getting our new representation hired. Looks like you're going to be there for another month and a half at least. And here's where we are in the process, and here's what we see happening with you. It was always, well, you're being told what you need to know. Is that old thing of, you're on a need-to-know basis, and you work for us. I'm like, how stupid was this? They almost lost me, because once you're in this situation of uncertainty, and then also you're a getter, I don't know, you can probably relate. All of a sudden, the competition says, wait a minute, here's this kid from Indiana. They just grabbed him out of his Indianapolis territory, threw him out here in California without any support, and then they're telling him, well, you might be here for, we don't know. We're working on stuff. You don't even know. Of course, then the competition came and said, do you want a better situation where we can actually utilize a young person with your talent? And that's where the communication, they almost lost me stupidly just because they weren't being openly and like you said, clarification of communication.
Yeah, that's a great story, Damian. No, not a great story as far as amplifying this issue. They could have said, hey, listen, here, we're sending you out to San Diego. We're not certain how much time it's going to be out there. It could be 2 weeks, it could be 2 months. So then at least okay, what am I signing up for? And so many bad leaders use information as a power over. Like, I have stuff that you don't know, I'm going to keep it from you, as opposed to, hey, let's just be transparent with each other. Even if you don't know, this is also a good thing that you can learn from bad bosses. A good boss will say, I don't know, I haven't been through this before. I'm not sure how long this is going to last. I know, though, together we're going to figure out a way forward. A bad boss is going to be like, he's not going to be, call it vulnerability, which is, obviously a word that's shared a lot nowadays. But just say, hey, listen, sometimes you just don't know. I know when I went through my last bad day, that whole accident, like, that was the first life-altering crisis I've ever been through. I didn't know. And it's okay as a leader to say, you know what, I don't know. Here's what I do know. And I know the remaining puzzle pieces, we're going to be able to figure that out together by being curious with one another, power with, brainstorming, however you want to frame it, whatever verb you want to use.
I like your thing about priority, of clarifying the priority also. And that's a good leader, because take an example of high school sports. I've always used this before. A bad football coach comes up there and says, okay, outside linebacker, your job is when the tight end blocks down, you do this. Like, well, what's the big picture? Well, the big picture is we want to stop the offense, the opposing offense, from getting 10 yards, which would be a first down, because we want to then, by doing that, that keeps them from going down and scoring a touchdown, which means that then we get the ball back and we give the opportunity. Big picture is winning the game. And how do we do that? Well, we do it by this, this, and this. Instead, they just go up there and tell the guy, your job is to block this way, or your job is to defend this way, instead of big picture, win the game. How do we win the game? By preventing them from scoring more than us. How does that happen? By that. So prioritization can be brought right down. And you think about, most people are bad coaches. They just go in there and say, put this screw on this nut. Well, I get that. But what's the ultimate thing? The ultimate thing is a pickup truck goes out the end of that factory.
Yeah, a good leader is going to know, all right, what's our final outcome that we're striving for to the football? Win the game, win the Super Bowl. All right, let's break it down. Each person on this team, all 11 on both sides of the ball, we all have different roles we need to do. Here's your priority for your role. When we all do that together, all 22 on the field, if you're looking at both, then those are the building blocks that lead to our ultimate victory. So good leaders know how to paint or create an aspirational vision of like, hey, you know what, tomorrow is better. You want to come with me? And they bring the right people together, the right team members, and then they make it about that shared success. Because the leader wins and the company wins, stakeholders, shareholders win, and so do the employees when we do this in the right way.
Well, then they get buy-in. Okay, I promised our listeners we're going to cover another topic, breaking the cycle of negative self-talk. This is probably a pretty easy one, but we all get there. It's not that you are totally unconfident. It's not that you just have no self-esteem. It's just the more, especially now, right now, we're recording this when we're dealing with this pandemic, you got more time on your hands, or you've got more time to ponder, or worse yet, be uncertain. And then that leads to, damn, I'm not as good as I thought I was. Why, boy, things are going really badly. Talk to me.
Yeah, well, when I was in the hospital, I had a whole bunch of time on my hands, and you mentioned 9/11. I was in the hospital during 9/11. So you have a whole bunch of self narratives. I think one of the first things we need to do when we have these moments, because anybody charging after something bigger is going to have a moment of self doubt. So remember, just, hey, hit the pause button, breathe a little bit, just like that basketball player on the foul line. Like, what does he do? What does she do? They always they dribble the ball, they take a breath before they shoot. And I think that's so important, when we have these moments. And then try to go back into our catalog of the good things that we've done, our accomplishments. We tend to forget those when we're stressed. We're like, oh, we haven't accomplished anything. But if we pause long enough, take a breath, and reflect back to, what? Throughout my whole career, throughout my life, there have been moments where I doubted myself. I found a way up and over that obstacle. What can I pull from those experiences to apply right now to help me get through this particular one? So that's a big one. And then I think the third one to get through these tough moments is who's in your network. And we'll talk about this here in a sec, but do you have the right people who can bring out the best in you? Because again, we're all going to go through these moments. So lean on the right people that maybe they can help you see what you don't see in this particular moment. And that might just be enough of a shift to get you unstuck.
Yeah, I like your point there about I always say, when you know what you've been through, you know what you can get through. It's the thing about resilience, and that's where the negative self-talk. I'm going through a challenge managing all of this business disruption because of the coronavirus outbreak, and you are too, and it's formidable. I mean, it's not like, oh, I lost a week's worth of revenue. We're talking about losing 1/3 or 1/2 of your year in revenue. And so you're like, Jesus, that's terrible. But if you've been through enough battles, at least you then have, shall we say, the experience to fall back on. You don't like it, but it does help with the negative self-talk, because then saying, oh man, there's no way I'm ever going to come out of this. You're like, I'm probably going to come out of it because I did before.
Yeah, great point, Damian. Like I know this because you and I both have been through recessions before 9/11. That this moment too shall pass. We're gonna get through this as a country, as a planet, because it's a global pandemic. But what's interesting when I look at my daughter, my oldest daughter, who's 22, her generation, they haven't been through anything like this before. They didn't have a 9/11, right? She was too young at the time. So their level of anxiety in this moment is far greater than the type of folks I tend to hang it with. We know through experience and perspective that, yeah, this is going to be tough, but we'll get through it. And so it's important, again, to have the right people around you to help you in these moments, because they might have a perspective to share that can really help you get unstuck and change that narrative.
Which brings us to the last point: a network, a strong network. You want to be successful, develop a strong network. Okay, you just said having the right people. How do I get the right people? I know how you get rid of the wrong people. I say this all the time. You got people in your canoe that are not only not paddling in the right direction, they're paddling against you. Throw their ass out.
Oh, so I love that. So my canoe is called a peloton. So for those that don't know what a peloton is, it's a group of cyclists in a bike race. Like, so in the essence of like the Tour de France. So for me, your network is like, who are you riding with, canoe wise? Who are you rowing with? And I'm right there with you, Damian. Like, if you got the wrong person you're riding with, drop his butt, kick him out of the boat, because you can't drag those people around. So that's the first step. I look at who's in your peloton and your network from a diversity perspective in terms of different roles. So I believe, you said people in your life, personally and professionally, can help you with a crisis like the coronavirus, who can be there to challenge your thinking, to put you outside your comfort zone, who can help you clarify, ask you the right question when you're stuck, maybe get your thinking going a little bit differently. They can be there to comfort you when you need some comfort, good old chicken soup for the soul, like your mama, and your dad maybe. And then who's around you to celebrate. So those 5 roles I think are important. It's good to have a mixture of people professionally and personally. So there's not one person doing too many of those roles, and they're gonna, they're the closest. Those 10, if you will, or 8 to 10 people. That's your main peloton. Those are the people bringing out your best in you. And yeah, you might have to mix it up from time to time because relationships change, people change. But being mindful of those, especially during this time, I think this is a good pause button to say, okay, do I have the right network? Do I have the right people rowing with me or riding with me so I can have a successful 2020 and beyond when all this is all over?
So answer me then, I caught 4 of them. Okay, so the people in your network, because everybody has a certain role. Probably they have multiple roles. There's probably one person that will fill 2 or 3 of these roles, but they'll probably not fill all 5 of them. The people in your network need to do the 5 C's. Somebody when you are in crisis that can shepherd you through that, help you clarify things, give you comfort, celebrate when things are good. What's the second C I missed?
Challenge you or confront you. So that person that, like, when you need to get outside that the resistance or the status quo, like, they're going to push you. They're going to push your buttons, Damian, and you're going to hate it. And you're going to, like, curse at them. And you're going to be like, when it's all said and done, you're like, thanks for that push. I needed that push. You needed someone in your life there. I have, out of my peloton, I have like 8 people, like my wife serves a couple different roles. My best friend serves a couple different roles. But I want to make sure I have a good mixture, and I'm evaluating it from time to time, especially like in these moments, because you gotta have the right people to get through moments like this.
There is no question. I mean, but I actually like the one I missed is the challenge part, because so many folks, they don't have the fortitude, or they're too weak, and so they just find a bunch of yes men. Well, it's the old thing. Well, it's a personal level, like, well, I'm trying to save money. And I talked to Cindy and she can't save money. It's like, yeah, because you and Cindy go and blow your money on nonsense every day. That's not a challenge. That is what we call an enabler. Yeah. All right. His name is Michael O'Brien. Last thoughts, last closing wrap-up thoughts here on the Do Business Better podcast.
I would say leadership, as cliche as it sounds, it's a gift. It's a real responsibility. So we talk about accountability a lot. And I look at accountability, not in terms of consequence, but ownership and responsibility, that when we show up better at work, we can change how we live together. And I think we need to change how we live together. So I would encourage people to step into that leadership role.
I like it. Michael O'Brien, you can find him at www.michaelobrien, that's Michael, like the traditional spelling, O'Brien, BRIEN, shift.com, michaelobrienshift.com. I'm sure you can connect with him on social media there and pick up some more of his tips, buy his books, whatever you'd like to do. Michael O'Brien, thanks for being here, my friend.
Thank you, sir.
All right. Till next time, it's the Do Business Better podcast.